friends, and welcome back to another episode of Superhero Saturday, where we talk about the art of superheroes, storytelling, and so much more. Today, we're going to talk a lot about the art of superheroes. When I designed the costumes for the superheroes in my books, I took careful consideration into the history of comic books and the history of how superheroes and their costumes were presented. So I did a lot of research into the history of comic books and all that kind of thing. And I thought it would be really cool to do a little video series about the history of comic books and the history and specifically of superhero costume design. What we're going to do in this series is take a look at each of the different eras of comic book history and apply the costume concepts of that era to my own superheroes and see if we can come up with costume designs that would be really in place back in that era of comic books. So let's go ahead and get started by talking about the very beginning of superheroes and costume design in comics. The beginning of superheroes as we know them began even before the 20th century with vigilante characters like Robin Hood and fables like the heroes sung by the Greeks. But superheroes by such a name first began to appear in the 1930s in the comic pages of newspapers and then in collections of those comics that would turn into graphic novels and comic books like we know them today. The first big-time superhero that is recognizably what we understand as superheroes was, unsurprisingly, Superman, who burst onto the scene in 1938 and was immediately followed by many characters in the same vein. This sparked what was known as the Golden Age of Comics, where stories of superhumans filled the colorful pages of newspapers and comic collections, and began to find their way into the hands of millions of readers. By the 1940s, comic book superheroes were undeniably the new big thing. As the world entered the 40s, America entered into the biggest war in history, World War II. Many early superheroes became embroiled in the throes of patriotism, and characters like Captain America were often depicted defending freedom and justice in red, white, and blue. Female characters were also empowered to become heroes, like Wonder Woman, who was just as early and powerful of a frontrunner as her fellow supers. This was a new world, and the colorful superheroes in the pages of newspapers told fantastic stories of good triumphing over evil in an age where hope was in high demand. If we take a look at some of the earliest costume designs of the first superheroes, it's easy to see hints of 1940s fashion. For example, though you wouldn't see someone dressed in tights and a cape on the street, Superman's high-waisted costume and his slicked back hair were standard at that time. His bright, patriotic colors were also everywhere, and easy to print and recognize. His outside underoos were actually inspired by Victorian-era strongmen, and since super strength was his only real power starting out, this made perfect sense to his audience. Superman also started that hero trend with the emblem on his chest. His modern S design wasn't created and copyrighted until 1945, but he always had an S and a shield on his chest, which, after having been copied into so many other designs, originated the trend of heroes with logos on the fronts of their costumes. For women, superhero costumes made a little less sense at first glance. If we take a look at the original Wonder Woman costume, we can see that she wears something that's fairly similar to her modern one, with a sleeveless red bodice and star-spangled shorts. Readers often thought she was wearing a skirt, but apparently it was actually intended to be a pair of culottes that were traditionally worn by female athletes. She was also seen wearing Greek-inspired strappy sandals with no heels, all surprisingly practical elements for a female crime fighter. Within a few years, however, she was soon wearing short shorts and high-heeled boots. So, now that we know a little bit more about the history of Golden Era costumes, let's go ahead and draw some for ourselves. Now, just as a little disclaimer, I'm not going to try and draw in the style of Golden Era comics because that's a whole different thing in and of itself. I'm just going to be trying to create a costume for Cannonball Cooper and Redemption that best matches the style of Golden Era comics costumes. So we're just going to invent new costumes for them that look like they could have been from the 1940s. So let's go to the drawing board. We're going to start with Cannonball Cooper. He's got a basic long sleeve shirts, long pants, and shoes all made from super strong Wonder Wick fabric with red, orange, and blue like you see here, but no cape. Because as we all know, capes are not very practical for fighting crime. I thought the best place to start would be to just give him the format of the Golden Age superhero, so I gave him red underoos like Superman, orange tights, and a red cape, because what's more iconic than a cape? I also did his hair in a more 40s era style rather than his usual gel do and put his Cannonball logo front and center on his chest. With a little finagling, I think that we've got a pretty good example of Cannonball Cooper if he had first appeared in the golden age of comics. We'll do the same for my female costume superhero, whose name is Redemption. For her, I took a lot of inspiration from the early 2000s X-Men movies with the leather jumpsuits and a little bit of color here and there. So you can see that her color scheme is mostly black with purple and yellow. I personally always design all my heroes as being fully dressed from wrist to neck to ankles for full cover protection. But back in the day when the rules were being made up, that wasn't really the case for female characters. So for Redemption's golden era costume, let's try and do our best to draw right from the Amazon princess herself. I gave her shorts and a sleeveless bodice, and I gave that as much color as I could by putting purple and gold as much into the design as possible. I even changed her symbol to a basic golden triangle on her chest, which is kind of reminiscent of the eagle from Wonder Woman's earliest costumes without being the standardized superhero logo on the chest thing. I also gave her boots and cuffs that give her a little bit more protection and styled her hair in victory curls. And I tried to do kind of more 40s era makeup for her face, but I did my best. And there you have it. I think that's a pretty good golden era Redemption costume. And side by side, I actually think they look really cool. I really love the history and the historical look of superheroes, so putting Cannonball Cooper in a cape is kind of like a childhood dream of mine. And then Redemption, I mean, she shows a lot more skin than she really should be, or she really wants to be, but I think that it totally fits in with the whole, Justice League of America, Super Friends type vibe. So as a part of this video series, I'm gonna go ahead and continue through the almost 100 years of comic book history by doing different eras of superhero costume throughout the years, all the way up until the modern age. We're gonna have another video of this type, hopefully next month, and do the same kind of thing where we talk about the history of the next era of comic book history and apply those kind of tropes and styles to Cannonball Cooper and Redemption. If you liked this video, go ahead and give it a big thumbs up. And if you want to see more superhero related content every single Saturday, go ahead and hit the subscribe button below. We're also over on Patreon if you want to support us over there, and you can check out our website with all of my books that have the Fearless 9 superhero characters in them by going to our website at www.fearless9.com. Thanks so much for watching this video, and we'll see you next week, Super Friends.